Everyone. My name is Lori Gagan. I'll be your host tonight on this podcast with Phil Lyman, Tracy Helverson, and Jim Gagan. But before we get started, I would like to say a few words on the importance of this upcoming state organizing convention. I was honored to be at the state convention last year. However, I was extremely disappointed by the disorganization. The credentialing was a nightmare for our state delegates, which caused everything to start extremely late. And of course, it took the convention past midnight without much of the agenda being completed. This is a reflection on our current GOP leader. I was very impressed by the dedication of all the delegates that stayed to the bitter end. This convention is a critical event for you as a state delegate. It allows you to shape the party's leadership, directly influencing Utah's political direction, which we know has been going down the wrong path. Utah is on the government's radar because of it. We need to get back to our grassroots of being known as a conservative state. We find ourselves beholden to politicians who harm our families by not listening to the people and putting into place greedy bills that most of us do not want. They like to talk the talk, but not walk the walk. Our current GOP, who claims to have a fresh face, is a decade-old politician whose number one bullet point on his expensive marketing campaign flyer is that he raised nearly $3 million. His last bullet point, which is one of the most important items to a lot of us, was SB 54. The only one that I know who has stood up against this is our trusted candidate, Phil Lyman. Why? Because Phil is the only one who publicly stood up and addressed it, and then went far beyond by requesting SCOTUS to review the election discrepancy. Phil Lyman has been a trusted figure for many Utahns, even after he was forced to the primary for governor, which I then asked myself, where was our current GOP chair when this happened? Crickets. Rob Axson was part of the SCOTUS discrepancy because he did not stand for Phil Lyman, who received 68% of your votes as delegates at last year's nightmare of a convention. This is another conversation in itself. But Phil Lyman continues to fight for your voice to be heard. There are a lot of business issues that need to be cleaned up in our party: land grab, taxes, housing issues, etc. I pray that all of you, as our state delegates that supported Phil in the past, will continue to do so and elect him as our next GOP chair. We need someone with courage who is willing to go against decades of corruption that harm our families. This needs to be an honest, trusted, new face that is willing to fight for you so that your voices are heard. And Phil Lyman is that man. And one last thought. Our current GOP leader, tagline, I bring fresh leadership and new energy. Well, I say to you, this is not new energy, nor is it a fresh new leadership. It is a decade of an old politician who just came out and said he had to register as a lobbyist. Now ask yourself, how long has he been a lobbyist? Which is a conflict of interest. Phil Lyman, we need experience, tested leadership, not unproven ambition in critical times. We were one of the states this election that had an uptick from red to blue in this election. Change happens this month. We do not have another 5 years. This election this month with our GOP leaders changes the direction of Utah. And Leighton, if you could play that video, please.
Key question that we have to ask ourselves, all of us, is what are we going to do? And I challenge all of you to think about what you're going to do today, what you're going to do a year from now, what you're going to do 5 years from now. We need a 5-year plan, all of us. We need a 10-year plan, all of us, within the party and within our neighborhoods and within our families. The Utah Republican Party, the principles that we believe in, our platform is a force multiplier for good that has helped contribute to the fact that Utah is the best state in the country. But our potential is far higher and exceeds in tremendous ways anything that we've accomplished thus far. So our high watermark is not enough. I firmly believe that God expects us to step up to the plate and to rise to the occasion and to be that force for good, because Utah needs to be in the driver's seat as an example to the rest of the country. You look in Utah, here in the Intermountain West, in my lifetime, we went from all Republican states except for labor union tough Montana, that was kind of a lot of miners and different things. And what is it now? Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado have all gone red to blue. Utah's next. Now, we did get Montana back because the Democrats went so crazy, but Utah is next if we're not careful. So Utah has to do the work now to make sure that what happened in those states never happens here. And again, I believe that our potential and our expectation from our maker is for Utah to be the force multiplier to retake those other states.
Decade politician who just came out saying that we need to take it back. But on his dime, we went from red to blue. And with that said, I would like to bring in Phil Lyman, Tracy Helverson, and Jim Gagan. So welcome. Hello. Hello, Phil. Hello, Tracy. Hello, Jim.
It's great to see you all.
So, you know what? We have a lot of questions. We have a lot of answers that the state delegates want to hear. So let's just jump right in. Phil, I have the first question for you.
Okay.
Can you explain to us why Rob Axson was named in the SCOTUS appeal?
Yeah, the main reason why Rob was named is because he would need to be ordered to take some sort of action to leave him off. And I talked to him before. I said, I can either put you on this case. I'd love for you to join it as a plaintiff. If not, then you have to be on as a defendant because you're involved in this. And there's going to be some action that the court is going to take that would either, support you or go against you, depending on which side of the issue you're on. So I guess that's in a nutshell. The court was asked to take some action related to the election. And the GOP was going to be pivotal in basically putting my name back forward as the candidate for a re-election.
Thank you, Phil. Tracy, as a supporter of Phil's vision, can you chime in on any additional thoughts of your own?
So the petition that Phil did to this Utah Supreme Court, it was just to ask, hey, the law says this, you guys chimed in 2016, and it's being applied this way. So it wasn't a malicious thing, it was an administrative thing. And if the party would have joined Phil, in my opinion, it wouldn't have got dismissed by that one judge because it would have detoured that illegal dismissal. That judge didn't have even the authority to dismiss it. The code even states that he had to review it, but they just dismissed it. And I feel like if the party would have stood up for the delegates, just not even Phil, because it's the delegates' vote, it would have helped Phil. It would have been more of a, we need to straighten this out.
So basically, for me, on everything that I've like researched and done, following Phil, following Rob, and my opinion, I feel that the current GOP leader should have stood up for somebody fighting against something in my words, which I feel it was corrupt and crooked. But Jim, take the next question.
Can I just respond really quick to that?
Sure.
Because this has never been about my fight. I mean, I say it's not my fight, it's the fight. And it's the fight for the GOP. It's the fight against the kind of the elite, the top down power structure. And it's exactly what the GOP says that they're going to stand against, is kind of that, you know, government by an oligarchy or an autocracy, and instead from the bottom up. And so it's disappointing when I find myself fighting someone else's battle, and the person or the group or the party in this case doesn't step up and fight with you, and then you end up naming them as a defendant. It's like, man, we said we were going to do this together, and now that it's time to really go to the mat, you're not there.
Thank you. And that's 100% correct. So thank you for interjecting that. Jim?
So Tracy, I'm going to have Leighton play a video, and then I'm going to ask you a question about what your thoughts are on SB 54 and why there was no pushback from the party, even though 68+% of the delegates voted for Phil.
Okay.
So Leighton, play that clip, please.
Do you consider SB 54 bad? And if so, what have you done to fight against SB 54?
Yeah, hard stop, yes. I have never once liked SB 54. I have never once hid my disdain for it. I have never once watered down my dislike for that system. Since it was passed in the legislative session in 2014, I have opposed it. We have had 5 election cycles now, 16, 18, 20, 22, and now 24, that we've had to go through the effects and the hamstring effects of the rules of SB 54 that takes and it keeps the party process, right? Wink, wink. It gives you a way to get around the party process. That's what it did. And so I have always opposed it. I've always promoted those candidates and those causes that want to get back to the spirit of pre-SB 54, the spirit of the delegate process. Firmly believe in that.
So the question is, why do you think they didn't stand up and push back on the fact that our party nominated somebody and it didn't matter? I mean, I refer to the SB 54 more as the Incumbent Protection Act. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if there are delegates out there who don't think it's an issue, Judicial Watch, which, you know, polices the government, they sent a formal request to the lieutenant governor in March of this year, giving them 90 days to send information back on why they are not complying to the National Voter Registry Act. And there are other organizations who are also pushing on this. So why do you think our party in Utah didn't stand up for their delegate?
Well, his comments.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I didn't watch that debate, but those comments that he just made, that was not, his actions do not reflect those comments. He did not, he doesn't hate SB 54. He didn't do anything to even stand up for it or up for us as delegates and say, no, you're not putting our nominee through a primary. That's not what we stayed for 18 hours or whatever it was. But in my opinion, it's because when you have a lobbyist is someone, that's how they earn their money. They push policies. And if you tick off the wrong legislator, they're not going to pass your bill. And then that's going to make the company you're pushing the policy for, well, I guess you missed out on your bonus. So if you don't have somebody in there that will fight for you and stand up for our party, it's just going to be staying status quo like this was. I reached out to Phil or to Rob several times, even with the CD2 race, and said, "Come on, Rob, we need someone strong, a strong leader. Stand up for our party. They cannot force those rules upon us." And he just would always just brush me off because he wants status quo. He can't upset anybody.
Yeah, I have a feeling that in his world, everybody was a Republican. So what difference did it make?
Yeah.
But it made a difference. A lot of people spent their time, the delegates, the caucus system, all of those weekends. And for what?
Well, and I don't like the policies that I'm seeing coming out of the legislature. And it's a business. It is not a representative form of government. They have been given a list of bills to pass. And if you do not join, they will make sure you're not reelected. So that is why they just keep going along. And Phil's the one that, I mean, he was in the House. He learned that's what's going on, is they're not listening to the people.
You want to? Am I supposed to take the next question, Lori?
Yeah. Hey, Leighton, can you play that third video, please?
So for me, I spent 13 years in the United States Senate working for Senator Mike Lee. So I took that as my professional kind of path. And then shortly after being elected to the party chair position here, I left his office. One of the reasons I left his office is I didn't want this service to ever seem as it was beholden to one individual, even if I agreed with him. I didn't want my decisions to reflect on him or his decisions to reflect on the party. So I moved into the private sector and I do consulting work. So I consult on businesses, startups, a couple of energy companies, and a bunch of nonprofits. One of those, the Other Side Academy, Other Side Village, that you may have heard,
All right, let's
heard
ask
about. They do really great work. So this last legislative session, for the first time, I actually had to register as a lobbyist to represent them on trying to get some reporting requirements done. They had some COVID funds that came to them, and they were then obligated to report to the federal government for 50 years.
All right, so there you go. Jim, your next question, please.
So as a lobbyist, I mean, I think Tracy kind of addressed it. What I'm going to do for the podcast is there's a tool that you can use called Citizens Portal. It goes out and pulls videos and transcripts from all of the legislative and all of the local governments. And there was a group of delegates that after the legislation closed last year, Rob addressed most of these questions in ways that I don't think you're going to be happy with. When asked about SB 54, his response was, well, I did what the party told me to do, or what our platform said, our bylaws rather. And then it was state law, and state law was the one that trumped, and I wasn't going to push back on it because it was tyranny to push against. I think it's tyranny if you take the Republican Party and dictate to them how their election is run outside of the party, even if the incumbent at the time was a Republican, because that's not representative.
Well, and my point is, now we see that even the signature process never applied to us. And that was what Phil was trying to explain in his case, is it didn't apply to us. The Utah Supreme Court already did. But now look, they have left us with a system that nobody even nominated that guy. I mean, he never got the signatures. He didn't even qualify for the ballot. And so for him to say that, to go against it, that is, to me, that is,
I'll take that clip and I'll post a link to it when this is posted to Rumble. And I think if you're a delegate, it's worth listening to, because very political answers, didn't really address any of the concerns, and there were a lot of concerns.
I want to chime in on that one. You tell me if I'm jumping out of line on this, but to me, I could talk forever about this because it hits right at the core. I mean, I respect a person who needs to make a living. And sometimes that means you're a consultant. Sometimes that means you have to register as a lobbyist. Sometimes you do these things. But what I've seen happen, and this is where my experience informs my politics, you got people out there in the public, your neighbors, your friends, your family members who are trying to make a living, and policy rolls in and rolls right over the top of them, shuts down their industry, shuts down their productive capacity, closes off access to the resources that they might need, puts regulations on top of them, raises their property taxes out the roof, all of these things, while somebody else has got an inside track to the legislators or to the policymakers. And I'm not saying that Rob has an inside track. I'm not saying he's got his thumb on the scale, but it's a system that circumvents the free market. Free market says, I have as good a shot at winning with my business idea as the next person. And if his is a better idea, then he's probably going to win and I'm going to lose. When you get lobbyists running the show, when you get money buying the politicians and buying the policymakers, then real people get hurt. Honest people out there trying to do the right thing. And the sad part is that most of them don't know what's happening. They're looking and saying, they don't understand why their industry was shut down, why their logging company no longer is in the business and somebody else's logging company is. And you get digging into it. And this is what I've said during the COVID response. People said, follow the science. Well, we followed the money. And when you follow the money, you find out we're being run by a bunch of pirates. I mean, literally run by pirates, and all they're looking at. And again, I'm not saying this about Rob. I'm saying he's got as much right to go out and try to make a living. But if he crosses the line on that, then he's in the wrong, and we're dealing with despotism versus a free market. And I will say my gripe has always been with Spencer Cox, because I've observed it from the time I was a county commissioner through the state legislature. I watched these things happening, and it's like, man, we have a system of lies that is driving the whole process, and that's got to stop. So that's why I'm running for, whether it's the state legislature or the county commissioner or whatever it is, for these offices, because this has got to stop. We can't operate this way. It's counter to a Republican form of government. It's counter to America.
Thank you for adding to that.
You made a good point, Phil, because he does have a right to go make a living. But if it's going to put you in a position where you can't stand up for a party, then maybe you should reconsider of your extra curricular activities.
Well, and the question you always want to find out is this a one-off, or is this systemic? Yep. Are you is this like innocently unaware and things happened, or is it criminal intent to deceive people in order to promote the agenda? And I don't know, but there's that, what they call it, mens rea, or state of mind question in the legal business. It's like, well, how much culpability is there? And what I'm finding, I guess, the more I dig, the more intentional all of this appears.
Thank you.
Well, and I think when people ask if a lobbyist should be at the head of a party, I think the conflict comes in. My understanding is that there is I guess he's doing energy lobbying is part of it. Well, let's say I hire him and I have a deal, and I'm pushing for a bill that's good for me, and I've got buy-in from the legislature and maybe the sitting governor. Well, then as the lobbyist, my job would make sure the sitting governor stays the sitting governor and not start that process over again, or I'm not a very good lobbyist. So I think there probably are some conflicts that come up, and I'm not saying that he did or he didn't. I'm just saying that why as a party would we have improprieties like that, that could be alleged?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Tracy. So the next question, and I want to move on for that, but I think for our state delegates who may not know, uh, it's important to know that um, his wife is a paid lobbyist, and that makes a difference, at least to me. So the next question is for you, Phil. Our current GOP leader claims he is against SB 54, but his actions seem to support the opposite. As a GOP party leader, what would you have done if the roles were reversed and our current grand old party leader was put through the ringer like you have been?
Well, the image that comes to mind is slow pitch softball. When you're playing slow pitch softball, your own pitcher is pitching to you as the hitter, and his whole objective is to pitch something that you can just knock it out of the park. So you pitch, and that's why I feel with this whole 2024 election. This was a gift. Like, here you go, knock this out of the park. Instead, they took a strike and said, "Gosh dang it, we struck out again." So what I would do if I were the GOP, and I don't know that we're ever going to have another 2024 scenario play out as perfectly as this one did, where you have an incumbent governor who clearly lost the convention, a challenger who clearly won the convention, and then also, and I will argue, a really competitive candidate when it came to the primary. I think we won the primary. I think we're cheated out of that one as well. But of course, we can't ever look at any of those records. So you have a really viable situation where it's like, this is going to come down to whether or not the party gets involved, and they didn't get involved. So it's like, you can't then come and say, I'm against SB 54 and I'm for convention candidates. It's like, there's no way you can claim to do that. So, but if I were the party chair, number one, I would be fighting, assertively, not waiting for this big slow pitch to come across, but fighting assertively to stand up for our candidates, to stand up to the lieutenant governor's office, and really to stand up against the obfuscation that we have in Utah. It's a culture of obfuscation. We should have a culture of transparency. The GOP is the 800-pound gorilla in Utah. They have the ability, if they were to flex their muscle, they could affect things on such a dramatic scale. And I almost think that they know that, and sometimes, maybe in good conscience and good effect, they say, we better not be too aggressive because we do have so much power. That's being generous. On the flip side, you're looking and saying, you're not for us. You are actively doing nothing. When you are the 800-pound gorilla, you won't flex the muscle. That would not be the case if I was the chair. We would be well, and I'll couch it with this: the SCC is in charge. You're just the chairman of the state central committee. There's not a lot you can do without them, but there's a lot of influence that you can assert, and I would assert all the influence I could to get the GOP active.
Thank you for that, Phil. Jim, next question.
Okay, so this question is for Phil. What barriers do you see preventing Utah's GOP from upholding its own rules, such as supporting convention nominees? And how would you address these as chair? I mean, what would you do about it?
Yeah,
I'm sure it would be more than just saying, I don't like it.
Right. Again, to understand the mechanism and the real battlefield that you're up against, I go back to some of my experience working through the public lands issues and some really bad policies that were coming out. And then the federal agencies would come and say, we didn't have any choice. We were sued and we lost the lawsuit. Well, you find out that's what they call a sue and settle. It's like, we didn't lose that lawsuit. We worked with in this case, it was the, I forget the name, but one of the big environmentalists, Center for Biological Diversity, their largest donor was the national, it was the national agency. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was their biggest donor, and that's who they lost the lawsuit against. And the effect was, we were going to designate all of these species and Congress has no say in it because we've circumvented that through a sue and settle process. And that's exactly what I see happening kind of between the lieutenant governor's office. They act like we've got this big conflict going on, and oh man, the lieutenant governor doesn't like us because we went and took it to them. But the net effect, and Tracy kind of alluded to this, the net effect is there's no change. Nothing's happened. We haven't moved the needle. So you can say that it's the lieutenant governor's office. You can say it's the legislature. We've found the enemy, and the enemy is us in the GOP. There are people in the GOP who claim to be fighting this who are not fighting it at all. And I think that's the biggest barrier. Lack of political will.
One of the reasons that it makes a difference is in the 2024 election, Spencer Cox, John Curtis, Blake Moore, and in 2018, Romney were not the convention choices, and they bought signatures. And by bought, I just mean they paid somebody to stand in a parking lot and fill out clipboards with information, which I think the party and the candidate should have access to. I mean, who's the oversight? The guy running against you.
Well, and
In my case, yeah.
and to that point is if you have to have the right people in the right places in order to continue this fake election, because you also have an AG that he was eliminated at the convention. And instead of prosecuting the signature fraud that they found, so we don't even have a real nominee candidate that qualified for a ballot, he reduces it to a slap on the wrist, a plea of abeyance. Come on to Utah and do all the signature fraud you want, because nothing will happen to you. And we'll pay you out over $500,000 to do it.
It doesn't make any sense.
If I can chime in there just a little bit too, if there was no signature route, I want to be fair about this. Those candidates would put a lot more effort into the convention. I don't suspect that Spencer Cox would have stood up and told us all that we're irrelevant. Had he known that was his only shot, he knew that he was going to circumvent it. So if you took away the other path, it would force everyone into that convention spot, and they might do very well. You might find a Blake Moore that would come and really rally the troops and win at convention. When they don't have to do that, sometimes they say, we're going to take all of our resources, we're going to devote it to the general public, forget the convention route altogether. So it would change the way they would campaign. And this is another point in my campaign that I really wanted to highlight is I can take Spencer Cox in the general public. I can take him at convention, not because I'm so amazing, but because he had done things as a governor so many times that I looked and thought, there's no way you can get elected after you've done this, after you implemented DEI on a $100 million scale in Utah, after you use your pronouns, and after you veto the bill that keeps men out of women's sports. And I mean, just across the board, condemning people at a BYU volleyball game. There was 100 things. It's like you will not get elected in Utah. So I was willing to fight him on whatever front he wanted to fight. He didn't get his signatures, so that was a cheat. He circumvented the convention in a way that I think was a cheat. And then the primary election, to me, is the biggest. It's the biggest cheat that occurred, and I can say that because it'd be very, very easy to disprove me just by opening up the voter rolls and the cast vote records. Will they do that? Absolutely not.
No, and it's outside of your election for the delegates and I was there. I watched, Spencer Cox basically get booed off stage and scolded the entire convention. And then because it was ranked choice voting, he had 2 more opportunities to address the crowd, and he didn't even have the courage to do that. He sent proxies up because it didn't matter. So I'm hopeful that we can get somebody, maybe you, Phil, in a position in the party that will take a stand.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think Phil will. He's shown that he will.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that answer and the question.
Tracy.
Jim, do you want to take the the next question,
Sure.
6.
Um,
Thank you.
This is for Phil again. What steps would you take, or how would you restore the relevance of the state delegates? So it's not just a waste of time, or some straw poll at a rodeo with SB 54 to ensure the voices of the delegates and the people they represent are
Yeah.
relevant and shape the GOP in the future.
Yeah. Well, again, to really get to the reality, what is it that we're dealing with? And you have to look at the whole scene and recognize the delegate process. They cripple the caucus system, and then they could criticize the caucus system, and then they make fun of the caucus system, and then they make sure that the primary results don't match what the caucus did. And all of this is done by people who really hate us as delegates. They want us to go away. They really hate the Republican Party. They want to, but they know in Utah that it's a great way to, rather than trying to come in with a third, with another option, let's just take over the Republican Party. That way you cover all your bases, and it's very systemic. So in order to restore the relevance of the delegates, you have to acknowledge and confront that reality that we are a captured party by our worst enemies. And if you look at this is not left and right. This is up and down. This is like a uniparty, Envision Utah elite group at the top saying, no matter what you do, we will control politics in Utah. Mm-hmm. And people at the lower end they've got to stand up and say that's not going to happen. And then at the crossroads, whether it's up and down or left or right, is government, and government is supposed to protect the liberty of the people, not take their stuff or prosecute them into oblivion or whatever. They're supposed to protect that liberty, and the GOP, I would argue, the GOP is the rightful conscience, I guess, of the government in Utah, especially. If we're not going to stand up and hold them accountable, we certainly aren't going to expect the Democrats are going to step in and hold government accountable to the people. That's the GOP's job.
Yeah, and I think the GOP in Utah was as strong as we were, as I thought it was. We wouldn't have started to slide blue. I don't know if you guys have been through Salt Lake lately, but we're definitely on the wrong path.
We're losing the conservative grassroots people. They're discouraged. They're looking at saying, this is not the party that I, and the leadership. And I've been in the legislature when we have these big meetings. It's like, and they will say, Utah prefers a Mitt Romney Republican to a Mike Lee Republican, and we need to shift more to the Mitt Romney. Well, that's gaslighting. That is not true. That is not what the Republican Party wants. That's what the Democrats want. That's what the Uniparty wants, but it's not what the people want. So again,
I refer to Utah as a rhino sanctuary, or at least it seems like it's getting there.
And it's sad. You see these good candidates, these good conservative people that are just saying, I'm not doing this anymore. They switch over to either go independent or libertarian or
don't vote at all.
Or don't vote at all. Yeah, even worse.
Yeah, agreed on that. All right, next question. This one's for you, Tracy. Is there a way to make delegates feel relevant again and still put convention nominees on the general ballot?
Yes, and that is just enforce the law. I mean, the law doesn't require us to use signature gathering. I know everybody thinks that we're going to have to remove SB 54, but if the law was just enforced and the party stood up for the candidates, it would have ended. I'm sorry, but Phil did the right thing when he did, hey, I'm questioning how this election is being applied, when he did the Utah Supreme Court. But of course, that justice is the one that swears in the governor and is appointed by the governor. So he's going to just dismiss it. But if you have a party chair or leader or SCC group that will stand up and say, no, 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 you're not putting those people. That's not our rules. A state cannot do that. It's already been ruled upon. There's already been court cases. But if you don't have a strong chair, it's gonna be doing the same thing. Just gonna go through the same motion, and they're gonna put their signature gathers on it, and we're left with fraudulent elections, in my opinion, and no one's changing it.
And that's why this election is so important.
Mhm.
Again, because change doesn't happen 5 years from now.
No.
Change happens this month. This is the time for the state delegates who are following Phil to continue to have their voices heard. So thank you for that. Jim, you've got the next question.
So, Phil, what would you do differently to make the convention or the caucus system in general work a little bit better? You know, there were long lines, delays,
Right.
there was no food, you couldn't get through the bylaws and the business of the delegates because they ran out of time. And a lot of that was due to the fact that it was poorly managed. I also, I think that a lot of the delegates felt that it was amateur hour, and I'm not being mean. I'm just saying, I bet we've all been to lots of conventions and things. And I don't mean political, but just events, and they're run better than this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you were, say you're Jordan Peterson and you're coming to the Salt Palace, you would say, I want to make sure everything goes right here. This is an event. I want people to enjoy themselves. I want good security, but I don't want that security to be overbearing. I want people to be able to find food when they're hungry. I want people to, to really like be in their best mode as they're carrying out that business. So you have to anticipate that this convention is going to be fatiguing to people. So you try to make them comfortable. The credentialing process at the last convention was astonishingly fatiguing. People standing in line for 3 hours. It's like you can bet that they're going to be pretty fired up. And the fact that element could be remedied even on the spot. Like, okay, well, let's do this and this and this, and let's get these people through credentialing. But instead, it was just carried on. So then you start to wonder, is this on purpose? And I do want to say that there are enemies among us. They tried to sabotage the caucus system on caucus night. Well, they did sabotage the caucus system on caucus night. I assume they sabotaged the credentialing process. Somebody said, well, there was a padlock on a door that it shouldn't have been there. It's like, well, I'd like to know who put the padlock on the door. But number one, next time, don't let somebody back there to put a padlock on the door. Don't set it up so you're vulnerable to those attacks. And Tracy and I have talked about this. Caucus or convention should be a party. It should have a party feel, because you've got a bunch of people there who love America, who love Utah. No better place to come, wear your gear, encourage the boisterous outbreaks, all of these things, and say, yeah, this is what we're here for. This is America. This is Utah. Let's have a party on convention day, and reject all of those, fatiguing elements that are going to be there. To address those, make sure that they don't come in and have a dominant effect on the people.
Well, and I think it's not like it's the first time they've done this. Why isn't the party scheduled 5 years out in advance at different venues? You just say, hey, we need this date in whatever, and they'll be happy to book it for you. To that point, and again, I don't know how much of this is systemic and how much of it is excuses, whatever, but I don't think that the prior chair had done a good job of booking out the venues, which means that it might create some inconvenience for the current chair to go in and have to do some catch-up work to get on top of it. But you absolutely, like you say, what you're dealing with. So do the catch-up work, get up on top of it, and let's have a great convention. Surprised me was no food, everything shuts down, Why didn't they bring in food trucks? They're all over Utah. I'm guaranteed there's a bunch of food operators who've been like, I'd love to get to the convention center and provide, you know.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of things at the Salt Palace that the Salt Palace themselves sabotage. We had the We Connect. Tina Horlocker had her big event there, and they literally sabotaged, just outright sabotage that event because they're Marxists and they
Yeah.
don't so
Yeah, but there's got to be lots of venues besides just
exactly.
downtown
Yeah.
Salt Lake.
Yeah. So
If I'm from rural Utah, maybe I don't want to navigate the streets at midnight in a town that I'm not overly familiar with.
yeah, no, there are
Good
better
point.
venues.
Good point. Phil, I've got another question for you, but before I ask mine, Steve Ace wants to talk to you. I need to read this question. It's going to kind of sort of go hand in hand with my question. So Steve says, I have talked with a couple hundred state delegates trying to get them to attend this month's convention. And I hear time and time again from them, why should I even bother or waste my time when the state is just going to run roughshod over the delegates' votes anyway? Why should we take valuable time and energy out of our lives when the party will not back the delegates' wishes? So I would like for you to answer that, and then I'll go into one final question that's going to kind of go hand in hand with that. So if you would, please.
I think you have to preach the gospel of government and republicanism. You have to give people a pep talk. You have to get them engaged, and it's hard when things are happening. But again, to get the reality of what this is, yeah, we do have opponents. We have people deliberately trying to undermine us. And I love Patrick Henry's quote before he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." He said something to the effect, nature knows how to value its commodities, and it would be strange indeed if freedom was not purchased at the price of fatigue and effort and trial. And so we recognize this is not, of course there are people who are going to try to take away our liberty, our freedom, to cast a pall on the convention. We're going to do it anyway, and people need to know that. So you give the pep talks, you talk about it. Again, you preach the gospel to people. You what we need in Utah is a revival, genuine, like religious type revival of the Republican Party, and say we are Republicans. We're going to go out and bring in the lost sheep. Our Republicans who have really gotten discouraged, and acknowledge that there's been some discouraging things. And but I guess that's what I would do is say, number one, let's change it going forward, and number two, let's connect with the people on a real level. And no, these people are not dumb, especially when we're talking about like these engaged state delegates. These are highly informed people that are looking at this system and saying, this is futile. They're just working us over. I've said the role of the party chair, never let things that matter most be at the mercy of things that matter least. Your job is not to go to Nevada and get Trump elected. Your job is to get the lieutenant governor's office to comply with the law, so that your convention is conducted in an honest, forthright way. And I will make that as a criticism. I don't have a lot of criticisms for people who are in there trying, but that's a criticism that I have, is that our job is to focus on the apparatus and make sure that the playing field is level and that we're ready to go. And they did not do that.
Okay, thank you for that. And that's, what, Phil, that was, that's a good point that you made. So thank you for that. So last question, and then we'll have a few comments. Phil, I'd like you to take this opportunity to speak directly to the state delegates that are watching this. And I pray that the state delegates that are watching this will pass this along to the other state delegates who now feel defeated. But Phil, what can you say to the 68% of the state delegates who supported you at the state convention last year to continue to fight for you, assuring them that their voice matters this time, and to continue to rally behind your vision for a stronger, more transparent party, urging them again to stand behind you as you lead the charge for change.
Well, I guess thank you for doing this. Thanks, Tracy, for everything that you do. It's phenomenal. What I would say to the delegates, and I guess to everybody, is they've labeled us as divisive, however you want to pronounce that word. Is resistance divisive? Is resistance to bad policy and to government, is that divisive? What would we do? What would America look like if we didn't have resistance? And I would argue that it's a despot who calls resistance and friction division and condemns it. I don't condemn division. I don't condemn multiple, disparate viewpoints. America was founded with a constitution that was designed to take all those disparate viewpoints, all the contentious viewpoints that come and still have a functioning government in spite of the differences, not to make people think alike. And we're being ordered to disagree better. We're being ordered to stop the divisiveness. I'll say divisiveness. And that's a ploy. It's a ploy that despots use on people that they look down on. And I guess that's the one thing that is clear to me through the last 15 years of my political engagement as a commissioner and as a legislator, and then going through even more so as a candidate, is that there are a group of people who look down upon us, and we don't have to take it. We have all of the power to control the government. That's what a Republican form of government is. That's what the Declaration of Independence said, is that governments derive their just powers from us, the people. We are the collective conscience of the government, and it's our job to do it. I said this the other night. Someone asked about civility, and I said, as a parent, I don't scream things at my kids, but I desperately want them to understand the concept, so when they go out into the world, that they understand, that the reality of what's going on. You don't suggest to your kids that they don't play, in a busy street. You say, no, we're not going to do that. That's not being contentious. It's saying this is really, really important. So I've always felt an obligation in politics to explain it in a way that people understand. So this is dragging on a little bit. I'm talking to the delegates here. I would love for them to understand. I am not trying to pull the wool over their eyes. I'm trying to pull the shackles off so that we can see clearly what is happening and respond accordingly, because it is our party. It's a great thing. America is a fantastic country. We have an opportunity with Trump in place, that the whole landscape is like just laid out in front of us. And if we fail to seize this opportunity, I don't think we're going to get it again.
Thank you, Phil. So I just want to make some final comments, and then Tracy, I'll give you a few minutes just to wrap up to see if you have any final comments. So, marketing flyer, very expensive. Thank you, Rob Axon. I'm just going to read his bullet points again, because this is a seasoned decade politician in the importance of these bullet points. Raised nearly $3 million. And I'm sure that's in Phil's wheelhouse to help and do that as GOP chair. First party chairman to make cash donations in support of convention winners. Organized Utah volunteers. Well, the convention was a disaster. Grew the party, and as Jim Gagan said, we went from red to purple, and now he wants to talk about blue. Went over a seasoned decade. He has had the ability to make change. Continued the fight against SB 54, and we've watched his own videos. We know that he's part of the SCOTUS. I haven't personally seen any social media, and I've asked around. So to the delegates, what I would like to say again is that Phil Lyman continues to fight for your voice to be heard. There are a lot of issues at hand that we need to clean up in Utah. We need a fresh new face, and Phil Lyman is that fresh new face. So that I pray that all of you as our state delegates, that you continue to support Phil Lyman, that you show up at the convention, that you cast your vote for a trusted man who is fighting for you, your families, and to have your voices heard. We need someone with courage who is willing to go up against decades of corruption that harm our families. And Phil Lyman is that man. So with that said, Phil,
Can I just
Tracy?
say one thing?
Sure.
If you're a delegate and you voted for Phil to run our state as governor, don't you think he could run our party in this state?
Yep.
And thank you, Lori. And Jim, thanks for that. Those are nice words. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Tracy?
Well, thanks for having us on. And I just want to tell the delegates to show up, and we need to make a change. If we want to do things different, we can't keep voting the same people over and over and over again. This is your chance to make a change. And I know it's discouraging. It feels like that it's going to be the same status quo, but I promise you that it won't be with Phil. So,
And I have one final question from Jill Watson. So Phil, as a chair, will you be willing to stand up for our clear convention winners and even hold a public press conference on the state capitol so that all the media, public, know that you're fighting for their voice, and rally the people so our people know you're standing for us? Our winners deserve to be on the general ballot. And how can you comment for Jill?
I appreciate the question, Jill, and a little bit of manipulation to force me to do something on the state capitol steps. And the answer is yes. Honestly, fighting for me is an involuntary, it's an involuntary response. I can't not fight when I see things happen that are just wrong. So I believe in the caucus system. I believe that when we have a set of bylaws, a convention or a constitution, bylaws, and a platform, that we should follow those. And I'm committed to that. My mantra in politics, long before I even ran for office, was that honest people have rights too. And that means that other honest people will stand up when they see something happening. They stand up, and if you won't do that, then you're not a good neighbor. You're not a good father, whatever. You stand up for people that are trying to do the right thing. And so yeah, I would do that. And even if it meant, Jill, doing it on the steps of the Utah State Capitol, I would totally do that. And I do really appreciate people like Jill and those people that come with such conviction and conscience. I draw my inspiration from them, and hopefully it's mutual.
And Phil, I have one comment left for you. So as a believer myself, and in the Bible, they talk about David and Goliath. All the people were afraid to go against Goliath. And I just want to say that you inspire me, you inspire so many people, and you are our David, because you're the only one I know that's willing to go up against Goliath. So with that said, everybody, please share this video to any state delegates that did not hear it. I look forward to seeing every state delegate at the convention. And please remember, we need a man that's trusted, but more importantly, we need a man with courage, and Phil Lyman is that man. So thank you all, and have a blessed night. Good night, everyone.